make some presentations. We are going to be recording this meeting so that people can see it afterwards. Before I introduce everybody, I do want to recognize that we had a lot of questions from people before the meeting about different items that are a little bit outside of what we, the purpose of this session, but we will try to address them at the end as best we can. But it may be that we need a separate forums for some of the concerns that were raised. So let me introduce our team here. We're going to, in sequence, have some presentations made about the current conditions, about how the current water ban was decided, what was driving the decision behind that, and then some water conservation history and tips for today. And then, as I said, we'll try to address some of the questions that have been posed to us in emails prior to the meeting, and we'll then open it up for questions and answers from the audience. But during the presentations, we'd ask everybody to mute themselves. If you have a question during the presentations, you can write that down in the chat, and we'll try to, at the end, Lori, one of our staff who's moderating this session, will recognize the person and ask them to speak the question to us so we can have a dialogue, and they can have a follow-up question if they need to. And then we'll go through the list in order. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody, and so many of us are used to Zooming now that hopefully we've got the protocols down. So again, thank you so much for coming this evening. My name is Samantha Woods. I work for the North and South Rivers Watershed Association. We've worked in partnership with the town of Scituate for many, many years on water supply issues because of the concerns we have over fish passage in the First Herring Brook, which are the surface waters to your drinking water supply. I've also have here Sarah Grady, who is a watershed ecologist with the North and South Rivers Watershed and through the Massachusetts Bays National Estuary Partnership. She will be presenting information on the water ban and what the reservoir conditions and projections were and are today. And then we have Mark Cloud, who is, I think, the Assistant Water Superintendent.
Yes.
Mark, I haven't met you yet, so nice to meet you. With the town. And then Becky Malamute, who is a chair of the Scituate Water Resources Commission and is a volunteer, it's a volunteer position for her to do that. So we hope that we can provide a little bit of information and background to you, and then hopefully answer some of your questions at the end. So bear with us while we get through that, and hopefully some of the questions you have might be answered. And we'll do our best at the end to try to field your questions. So I am going to let Mark take over and talk a little bit about sort of current conditions and demand. And then Mark, you can sort of cast it over to Sarah. I'm gonna stop sharing right now though.
Okay, the current elevation of the reservoir is minus 48 inches, which is a drastically low level. It's contributing to the high manganese levels in our water right now because of that low level. Right now we're using about 200,000 gallons a day, more than we were a year ago when the reservoir was full. We noticed the big drop off when the pandemic started and the warm weather came in. Everybody seems to be using a lot more water. We've tried to educate the public on the high usage of water and how we can't support it. And then we've gone into violations and with the water ban to help to try to curb the usage. It hasn't done a whole lot. We're still on the high level. We've issued about 90 violations to date, and it really hasn't made any change to the water usage. That's about it on the usage and the level.
Okay. So thank you, Mark, for that. Sarah, maybe you can go up next with what Sarah has to present to you today is really the information that guides decisions around water bans. So Sarah, maybe you can start your screen.
Sure. Well, first of all, I just want to explain that what we have done at the NSRWA and MassBays is try to come up with a way to communicate regularly with the town and use information like the information that Mark just gave about reservoir level and the current pumping rates to try to come up with a reasonable projection of what their future reservoir levels might look like given that demand and given precipitation and stream flow. So what I've done is create sort of a basic model that uses that information to try to provide advice to the town. And the point of that is to say, hey, given the way things are going, this is what it's going to look like. So I'm going to just sort of show you some of the results from that from this year and sort of compare it to previous years. So here we go, share my screen. So this is actually, yep.
Now it's showing.
All right, so this is actually sort of all of the information that goes into that model. And the blue boxes are the information that I would get from the town on a weekly basis. So it's how many inches the reservoir is down. As of the 4th, it was down 46 inches. Now it's down 48, which converts to a certain reservoir level in feet. Full reservoir, according to this model, is 40 feet. And then the next is how many millions of gallons remain. So the reservoir as of the 4th was just about 49% full. Then I use the pumping information, surface water pumping that was given to me. In this case, it was just about 1.1 million gallons per day. And also then project that amount of pumping forward for about 2 weeks. So assuming like, oh, hey, we're going to keep pumping pretty high for a while, but then based on previous years, what is the pumping going to look like through October, which is usually about when the reservoir starts to recover. There is a place for me to put in any additional things, like when they're doing things like cleaning out pipes that can add a little bit of extra demand on the system. And then there are calculations looking at how much water is coming into the system through precipitation, how much water would be coming out of the system for stream flow. Then there's a conservation factor that kicks in when the reservoir gets to a certain level, or when there's a water ban in place. The town has typically demanded about 6% less of the surface water. So that just sort of makes an adjustment to that projection. And then that spits out how many days there are to when a water ban might be expected, when the stream flow might be cut off, and how many days of water are left in the reservoir. So in this case, the water ban, according to the model, was kicked in. Now you may be thinking, but we went into a water ban weeks ago. And the reason that that's true is we have been doing this every week. And this is kind of what the graph was looking like. So actually this has last year and this year on here. There's date along the bottom. And then this is the just number of days. So this shows how many days until the reservoir is at the level for a water ban to kick in, which is 48 inches below the spillway, and for stream flow to be cut off, which is 96 inches below the spillway. We've been putting the data in and sort of had this sort of straightish line. And then you see that as we get into June, this line and our acceleration toward when the water ban would kick in was actually starting to really get pretty steep. And as a preemptive measure, we discussed with the town both implementing the water ban and also cutting off stream flow, because the rate that we were approaching these points of concern was faster than we typically would. And as when I was thinking of an analogy earlier, is similar to, losing, if you lose control of your brakes, do you want to, be able to hit the wall at 60 miles an hour, or do you want to be able to hit the wall at 20? So we were really trying to be conservative and start conserving water before there was a problem that couldn't be controlled. So this is the data as of a few days ago.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to explain what was driving that acceleration?
Yeah, so there's a combination of factors. As Mark mentioned, there have been a lot more people just at home lately. In summer, water demand is higher. We have not had a lot of rain this summer. It's been a much drier summer, particularly compared to last year. And also there was a well that was not working for a couple of weeks, and that increased demand on surface water. So there were a bunch of different factors that all combined together to really put a strain on the surface water supply that was pretty intense. So instead, we wanted to try to recover the system somewhat before it got too low. But just to show you sort of some perspective on these numbers, so this again shows those same reservoir levels. This year is the line with the triangles, the solid line. Last year is the dotted line with the circles. And along the bottom, we would have the date, and then, which actually is up here. And then we've got the inches below the spillway. So 0 is when the water is going over the reservoir dam. Above it, the reservoir is what we would say is spilling. And then this line goes down, and when it reaches 48 inches below the spillway, that's the level at which a water ban would go into place. So when the reservoir is about 49% full. When it's 96 inches below the spillway, that is where, according to the regulation, the stream flow cutoff would occur, when the reservoir is about 20% full. And you can see that the reservoir is actually, whoa, hang on, sorry. The reservoir is actually about 156 inches to the low level outlet. So the reservoir levels are up here, and the rest of the depth of the reservoir is down here. But we're much lower than we were last year. But just to give some perspective to that as well, this shows the reservoir levels adding in 2016. So if you remember 2016, you remember that was a year where we were extremely concerned about water levels. And this time of year, the reservoir was about 80 inches down instead of 48. So still, reservoir levels are better than they were 4 years ago.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay. And I was just trying to answer some of these questions that are really
I know, I'm
basic.
seeing that there's some questions coming through, so I figured.
Yeah. I don't want to answer everything because I think we'll get to some of these
Yeah,
in the end.
sure.
But some of them are real basic questions because some folks maybe are less familiar with the whole system. So,
Yeah.
you know, just so everybody knows that there are wells in addition to the reservoir. And so it's not your only source of water, in other words.
Right.
It's just that in the summertime, you really take advantage of the reservoir to meet the increased demand in the summer.
And typically the groundwater pumping, the wells, provide a majority of the water supply. Right now, that's actually inverted. There's more demand on the surface water right now than on the wells.
Somebody asked if there was a map with the wells, and somebody said that they're not mapped for security purposes. I'm not sure is that true.
There
Mark?
is a map. Yeah, you can.
Let me ask Mark. He's the water assistant.
Generally, they don't like to put it out there for security.
Yeah.
But
although the reservoir is highly visible. It is actually out there, but yeah, it's not something that we broadcast. And then somebody asked to define stream flow. So because you have reservoirs and dams located on the First Herring Brook as part of your water supply, we manually have to allow water to go downstream in order to keep the stream having any kind of water in it during the summertime.
Right.
So as part of the condition of the Scituate's water permit, there are requirements to keep that stream flowing within the boundaries of you know, making sure that we're all safe.
Yeah.
So,
and when we're talking about cutting off stream flow, we are actually talking about, you know, turning off a natural stream that has things living in it.
yes.
You know.
Yes. Fish are definitely not happy in the First Herring Brook right now. But
which is also why it's at a lower trigger level than the water ban.
Yeah. And so I guess I just want to make sure everybody understands that this was a preemptive water ban, and it was unusual. And it was unusual because there was sort of this perfect storm of events taking place in June that included very dry weather in June. And if you notice, much of the state was declared in drought in June. And we also had a well fail that was quickly resolved, but still, while that well was out of service, they needed to take more out of the reservoir. That's why the curve started to kind of drop like that. And the fact that more people are home with the pandemic seems to have increased demand. So it's unusual. We would not have normally gone into a water ban that quickly, but I think you know, we just didn't want to see that curve continue to be where it was. So it went into a water ban in June, and continues now. Now is actually when the reservoir levels are at the level where we would have actually instituted a water ban. So I know it's a little bit preemptive, but we wanted to really make sure that we have enough water for firefighting, people drinking water. And again, this was really unusual circumstance.
And had the water ban not gone into place, there's a chance that we would have gone into the water ban earlier than this week because of that accelerated rate.
I think the other thing to emphasize is that you have water. We're not in any danger of not having.
About half full.
Yeah, right. Our glass is half full. And the ground, and remember, you do have groundwater wells. So it's not that you don't have water you have enough water for, as we like to say, people and pets. What we need to be sure is that we have enough water for firefighting, hopefully for some fish. We don't necessarily have water that can be used exceedingly in an outdoor way. So with that, I'm going to, maybe Becky and I are going to do a little bit on conservation, and then we can get to some more questions. So let me share my screen again, and we'll talk a little bit about some history of conservation and why water bans are kind of needed. So in 2011, which was a long time ago now, that's how long I've been in the game. I've been in the game for 15 years with the town of Scituate at least. There was a watering restriction that we started to help minimize that summertime demand. You see almost a doubling of water demand, and actually before 2011 it was even 2.5 times. That watering restriction was put in place to be on lawn irrigation, automatic irrigation systems only, and it was on 1 day a week based on your voting precinct. And we went back and actually identified during the first year of that in place that the town was saving on order of 300,000 gallons per day. So again, if you can kind of pair that to the fact that you might use in the wintertime 1 million gallons per day, and the summertime you're using sometimes up to 2, 300,000 gallons is a lot of water on a daily basis. In 2014, the town implemented a ban on hookups to the public water supply for new irrigation systems. So any of the new irrigation systems that you're seeing now that are from new development are on private wells. They are not on the public wells. They're not connected to this reservoir. They're not connected to your public drinking water supply. So that was done in 2014. And I'll just show you this. It's a little bit dated, but it does show you that how that restriction really brought down the demand from 2011 to 2013. So again, you see this is the demand curve of your annual usage. So in January, you can see you're down here, and in July, you're way up here, and it's about twice as many gallons being pumped. And I know that we certainly get an influx in the summertime of residents and population, but it's probably not double. And certainly, of course, we are using more water as it's hot.
Actually, Sam, before you go on to that next slide,
yeah.
I just want to say that we did also see a savings this year when we implemented the outdoor water ban. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it was in the first couple of weeks, we were saving about 200,000 gallons per day.
Yeah.
That usage has since increased, and we're back to that 2 million gallon per day use, which is another reason why we thought this would be a good time for this conversation. Because it, like I said, it seemed like it did have a good effect at first. We just need to keep it up throughout the course of the drier season to have a real impact.
I will say, for it, hand watering. Are you guys allowed to do hand watering at all right now? Gardens, yep. So hand watering really isn't as bad. It's really hard to use the kind of water you would use on a lawn. But lawns really we just can't afford it. It's so water intensive. So one of the things I like to share with people is, how much water are you supposed to use? What's the sort of standard that the state uses actually to calculate how much water you are allowed to have? And they use an annual average of 65 gallons per person per day. And you can actually go and take your water bill and we'll send you a link to this so that you don't have to memorize this, but you can actually calculate how much your household is consuming per person by taking the number of gallons consumed and dividing it by the number of days in the billing cycle and the number of people in your household. And that can give you a sense of where am I compared to 65. Obviously, if you're doing a lot of outdoor water, you use outdoor water, it might go up. But at least it gives you some sense of, am I doing my part to be as conservative as I can be and use that water wisely. For comparison, an acre of lawn consumes about 26,000 gallons of water. So it's just scale-wise, it's such a huge amount of water that's why we are so concerned about that kind of use. So I also wanted to share with you some resources. Whoops, sorry. I'll let, yeah, okay. So can everybody see my screen? Mark and Becky?
Yep.
Okay. Can you see it if I switch to like that screen?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, good. So on our, Becky, if you want to go through the town and their website offerings on water conservation.
Yeah, so this is the Water Resources Commission's website. What Sam's showing here is a outdoor water use restriction FAQ. Why do we impose them? What has the impact been in the past? What does it mean? What does each phase mean? And how do we go into the different phases? And then also on the left nav bar, there's also water conservation tips. These are things in the past that we've sent out by email through town, the town blast. And we've also had this website. We used to have some videos that we're working to recreate. But just some things so that people can have a sense of what they can do to help save water. This made a huge impact back in 2016 when we were going through the drought. And as we sent out more and more kind of how-tos, we really saw water use decrease. So some of the things I wanted to highlight here, you know, one of the reasons we're in this situation is because so many more of us are home and using just our homes and using much more water inside. So some of the basic things that we all can do is just be mindful generally of our water use. You know, if you're washing your hands for 20 seconds and singing your happy birthday twice, make sure you turn the water off while you're singing happy birthday. I know in my house we're doing a lot more dishes and a lot more laundry, making sure that the machines are full before you run them. And, you know, keeping showers to a minimum, installing low flow aerators and faucets, and also on your showers. If you have a pool, using solar cover for your pool. You're not allowed to fill pools under that outdoor water ban, but using it can decrease evaporation. You know, private wells are not susceptible or not regulated by the irrigation restriction or the outdoor water use restriction. But if you do have a private well, you know, you can kind of decide to follow the ban just as your neighbors have to, so that we kind of acknowledge that we're all in this together. And like I said, there are a lot more resources on here. We will have a new, simpler website coming up over the next week or so that will just be a clearinghouse for all information related to water quality, quantity, brown, white, clear. So just keep an eye out for that. So there's just a much easier place for people to go and get this information.
Cool. Let me go back to this for a second. Okay. Okay. So the only other thing I wanted to mention about lawns is that with any luck, you are not watering and your lawn is brown right now. And if it is brown, it's dormant. It's sleeping. It will hopefully awaken when it rains again. And that truly, I think we're going to see more and more heat and more longer term sort of these sort of what we're calling flashy droughts. And so my advice is to start considering how you can remove lawn and start putting in more drought tolerant, hopefully native plantings. And there's information that we'll send to you about that as well, to help with the water issue, but also to help with the ecology issue. And again, I have a son who plays soccer, so I know that, you know, you need a little grass. It hopefully will come back when it rains again, and it will rain again. And so just remember that there's a lot of water that would be required to keep that grass green during this kind of heat. And it's really not sustainable in any large quantity. So, and then I thought we did get a few sort of questions, as I mentioned, that I'd like to try to kind of preemptively, and I think some of the chat had some of these questions as well, that I've kind of grouped into their subject matter. A lot of the questions were the same. And so I thought I would, we would do our best to field some of these, even though this is a little bit outside of what we wanted to talk to you guys about today. I understand it's related and I understand the concerns that are out there about that. So first was, why are we letting new development into the town? Why not a moratorium on the new development? And so I thought I would just give you at least my perspective on the permits that you're allowed for drinking water. So you have a water supply permit that's based on an annual average. It is not based on your summertime demand. So the town of Scituate has a permitted annual average water withdrawal of 1.87 million gallons per day authorized to you from the state of Massachusetts. Remember, that is an annual average. So in the wintertime, as I mentioned, you're closer to 1 million gallons per day, sometimes 1.1, sometimes 0.9. But in the summertime, you can be up to 2. So on average, the annual demand is about 1.5 million gallons per day. So you can see that you have some room within your permit. And yet you're stressed in the summertime. It's truly a seasonal issue that you have here, that you're using more water in the summertime. And so I think that the DEP does not authorize a permit based on your summertime withdrawal, because so much of that may be outdoor watering. The water that they're taking out of the ground or out of other surface waters is meant to be drinking water, and of course for firefighting as well and public health. Lawn watering is a non-essential use under the terms of the Department of Environmental Protection. So they are not going to allow you to say no to a developer because you have lawn watering being used of your surface drinking water supply. So it's a real seasonal issue. It's not a year-round issue. And again, what's happening in the summer is we have more demand and less precipitation. And so there's just not enough water to meet a lot of outdoor watering demand. So I think that really needs to be understood, that it's a summertime issue. It's not that you don't have enough water to drink. And you probably would have a challenge because we live in the society we live in. Private property owners have a right to develop their property, and legally they would probably challenge the town if they were told that they couldn't when you have some ability to offer them this. So again, I think the issue really is about summertime demand and trying to maintain that as low as possible.
And Sam, let me kind of just add to that too. So there's this water master plan that was started about a year ago. It has been in conversations about this for probably 3 years. And a big piece of that master plan is intended to look at the seasonality piece, because while our Water Management Act permit is an average annual use, our issue is really seasonally, and our issue with our infrastructure is typically seasonally. So this master plan is meant to look at how long can we sustain this high water use. Now this year has been a true test. I think the infrastructure has held longer and harder than many people thought it could. But again, the goal for the town is really to understand how long we can sustain that increased water use, whether or not whatever our permitted amount might be. What is the amount of water that the system can produce, and especially under these stressed conditions. So I'm not sure, that plan was stalled a bit because we have another well that's being redesigned with a green sand filter, but I'm hopeful that will be picked up, and the next phase of it and the finality of it will come, within months.
So I think that really gets to our new sources being looked at, as well as sort of this, all of your infrastructure, right, Becky? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I will say that again, for the watersheds and MassBays point of view, we're very interested in their surface waters, because that's what supports the other wildlife in our watershed, and we are interested in raising the reservoir. That has moved to we're at the end of the design and need to get permits. It is not an insubstantial project in terms of financing, and we just applied for another grant to see if we could get through the permitting process to raise the reservoir, and that would give you a little bit more cushion in a drought. It wouldn't necessarily, again, nobody's going to say go ahead and water your lawn with this drinking water. Those days they're just not happening. And you're not alone in that. Scituate is not alone in that. Other towns also are being required to make sure that they don't use drinking water quality water to put on a lawn. So, so again, are new sources being looked at? Yes, they are. I know that the wells being revamped as being something that, I don't know if Mark, you have any comment on that?
We are working on a tack factory green sand filter that's expected to be online by next spring, and that'll add an extra 390,000 gallons a day to our system.
So that should be hopefully helpful.
We've
And then there's also,
Dolan well field. We just finished testing on that. We're waiting back for results, and that could be close to 500,000 gallons a day once it's developed, but that will be several years out.
Yep. So we find ourselves in this position right now, but maybe some of these other wells will help lessen some of the stress on your surface waters, because that I think is part of the concern here. So I think that the town is definitely looking at all these things. And then in terms of groundwater, again, I think a little bit outside of the scope of this, obviously everybody's well aware of some of the concerns here. I know that the water department has a email and a phone, you know, they want you to tell them where you're experiencing these conditions, and where the water quantity and demand meet the brown water is, as we increase demand in the summertime to, say, water a lawn or put it in a pool or whatever we're doing, that stirs up the sediments within these pipes and can increase the chance that you might experience brown water. So there is some overlap between these two issues, but I know that the town is working very diligently to address that. And Mark, I don't know if you have anything here to say.
Yeah, the low level in the reservoir has really contributed to the manganese level that the treatment plant is experiencing. The manganese is in the ground and it just is coming out and infiltrating the water as it draws down. And then with the high temperatures, the lake is turning over rapidly, and it's just stirring up all the manganese and putting it in the drinking water, and at a higher level than a treatment plant can remove it.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that answers all the questions. I'm going to stop the share so we can maybe take a look at what's in the chat here. Let me just scroll all the way up. Lori, have I lost you? I don't know what happened to my staff person here.
No, I'm here.
Yeah, you're here. You turned off your thing. Well, let's see. Maybe I can moderate here a little bit. Let me get past. So
I think we were about down to Deb LaSala. She wanted to know how many wells there were.
We have 4 wells in service right now.
mm-hmm.
Tack factory will be the 5th one going into service in the spring. Well 18 is offline right now because we don't have a residual station for it. And we're working on developing the Dolan well field.
Okay. Then Suzanne Hoffmeister had a question. Suzanne, do you want to unmute?
Or we could just say it.
Or I can read it.
No, she's got it.
I just wanted to ask if citations do not reinforce your water ban, why don't you try to get the people after the higher usage of water? You say 65 gallons per person per day is an average usage. So why don't you penalize people to make water really, really expensive? Because I see in my neighborhood that the irrigation systems are still up and running, even if you have a complete ban. People want their green lawns and they really don't care. And we can discuss, we have a lot of discussions about environmental and, you know, drinking water quality and everything. And I think they don't understand or don't want to understand, but I think you don't get them, you know, if you do not make water really, really expensive for them.
I'm gonna, yeah, let me give that to maybe Mark since he's the enforcement arm here.
That'd be very difficult to calculate because then you'd have to do research and find out how many people lived in every house and then do the calculation and then apply that to the water bill. And in the end, that would be a decision that the Water Commission would have to make.
But we do have a tiered rate system. So the higher end of water use is a significant increase in the amount of water and the amount and what you pay for your water bill. And also the move that we made a year or so ago to single meters will more accurately reflect that. So you can't just have a large development on one meter not paying that tiered level. But yeah, I mean, I do hear we do kind of need to figure out, and it's something we talked about in the Water Resources Commission, both how to maybe restructure the violations. The violation structure that we have is almost identical to almost every other town in the state of Massachusetts, but doesn't mean it couldn't be reworked. So it's something that we're looking at, as well as trying to identify how water users and really understand how they're using that water. So just also for everybody, you know, so the Water Resources Commission is an advisory commission that provides guidance to the water commissioners who are the Board of Selectmen. And we're seeing lots of great ideas here in the chats and in the emails we've received. So I highly encourage you to come to our meetings. It takes a lot of work to kind of put these policy proposals together, present them to the right people, and get some support. Our next meeting is Wednesday, August 19th at 7:30. It's virtual, but if you get on, you know, check the agendas on the town website, you'll see how you can dial in and be part of the conversation and help, you know, make some of these changes potentially happen.
So Bill has a question. Bill, do you want to unmute?
Oh,
If not,
did you miss
maybe-
Kyle? There was a Kyle Harrow had a question, Lori, after Suzanne. Is Kyle here? Kyle
Yeah.
Harrow? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So
I don't
Kyle,
remember. I asked a bunch of questions. I don't remember what they are.
well, let me see if I can read them for you a little bit. So one question you had, I think, was about the moratorium, right? About like, why are we letting, and I tried to answer that. It may
Yeah.
not be satisfying, but that is the somewhat of the answer. There also
No.
has been some try at town meeting to have a moratorium placed, right, Becky? I think two or three times. Three
Yeah.
times. Again, I think that it's not a simple thing to have pass. And I think you had trouble before you, I don't know that it's the silver bullet you want it to be, but it certainly is something that you could pursue as a discussion point with continuing with the town.
Yeah.
And how does the age of the infrastructure contribute to the water supply issues? I'm referring specifically to the old Oaken Bucket pump station. So I'm going to let Mark talk to you about that, because I don't
Yeah,
know.
I had another question further on, just kind of the same kind of thing, because I read the report. The report was mentioned then, and I read it, and the report, you know, said that the old Oaken Bucket infrastructure or pump station was, you know, in dire need of upgrading, and it kind of scared me to hear and to read how bad it was actually. So.
I would just say that my personal thought is when you have infrastructure that's failing, as you did in June with a well that went down, you just have a redundancy problem.
Yeah.
So that then you have to go and switch your management, and it may not, like in this case, they had to go to the reservoir in June, and it used more of that reservoir water. So definitely it can potentially impact it, but Mark, I don't know anything about the pump station.
Back when the treatment plant was built in 1967, the water quality in the reservoir was a lot cleaner, and so they built it to treat that quality of water. Now we have the weed growth and had the instances of more manganese because of the lower level, and it just wasn't designed to treat those high levels of manganese. The newer plants have more treatment techniques that'll help with that, and then you'll get clean water all the time. But the treatment plant doesn't affect the level of the water or the quantity that we have.
Do you have to pump more in order to have clean? No, so it's not really that. I think it's only an issue in a failing situation like this last one, where we had a well that went down, and then you had to use more of the surface water. So it did impact us this year in that way. So Bill.
Back to Bill. He wanted to know if irrigation from private wells decreases the flow of water into the town wells or reservoir.
Good question, Bill. I'm not sure have a very good scientific answer for you. Clearly, water is interconnected. And when we look at modeling water in the First Herring Brook watershed, we consider the public wells and the surface water supply all to be interconnected. So, but geology is not homogeneous in our area. So you could have areas where you might have deep wells that are not connected. For sure, there's probably a lag time. But in terms of water that you might take up, if you're closer to the reservoir, if you're taking water right from the reservoir, of course you're having an impact on the surface waters. If your groundwater well is further away, there may be a lag time in that impact. And if your well is really deep, it may never have touched that surface water because the groundwater might have flowed, say, into the ocean and come back up into a seep there. So unlike the Cape, for instance, which is one big sandy geology, the geology here is a little bit less homogeneous, and so it's a little bit harder to say. That being said, my personal opinion is that we are all in this together, and that it would be, I think, equitable to consider having private irrigation wells be under the same water ban regulations as the rest of the town. So that's my 2 cents on that. I don't know if you have any follow-up to that, Bill, or if you're even here. I see you're
Okay.
muted.
So Sean Gallagher's question? Sean, would you like to unmute?
Sure. I was just concerned again with the whole development issue that there doesn't seem to be a cap on any of it. And at what point do we outstrip the town's ability to furnish the water, especially clean and clear water? That's kind of important. People are kind of upset about that right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any other answers than the one that I gave. I will say this, I didn't talk about it, but I meant to, which is that the Water Resources Commission has a water conservation plan, and within there is a proposal to put in what we call a water banking policy. So any new development that would come in would have to find 2 gallons in the system, or 1 gallon, so that there would be a net zero demand increase, or even a net demand decrease from new development. So you know, on the one hand, you've got new development coming in that at least you're not letting them hook up to the public water supply for irrigation, right? We saw how much, you know, that irrigation really could cost your water supply. So that's been in place since 2014. Excuse me, I think putting in a water banking policy soon would be a good idea. And I know Becky could use your help. So I suggest getting involved with the Water Resources Commission to make that pitch to the town water commissioners, which are your select people. And getting behind that would be helpful to the town to help minimize demand as new development comes in, particularly because I'm not sure legally you have a way to just put a cap on it.
I agree. There's probably no ability to outright, you know, not allow any new development, but certainly you can restrict size and density and those sorts of things.
You could, I don't know if you can do it based on water. So those things are legal and beyond my pay grade. But I definitely think, you know, you should be part of the discussion. And I think that water banking is one tool in your toolbox of minimizing increased demand. But again, Sean, I'll say we've got changing climate, we've got hotter hots, drier dries, and we already have a seasonal issue. So there is a need to diminish that demand and really get a better handle on who's using water for what in the summertime. You know, is it really just that there's more people here and we need to supply them? Is it just, or is it really irrigation? Or is it, what is it that's driving that demand? And where can we make a bigger difference is it possible? And again, I think we're looking at a multi-pronged approach. Can we reduce demand? Because that's a new source, frankly. Can we get new water? That's helpful. Can we raise the reservoir? Can we put some new wells in place? And then how do we diminish future development impacts through a water banking policy? I think those are the three things I would recommend in your town.
And then I just wanted to add too that, currently, as Sam mentioned earlier, on paper, there still is enough water for new developments because our Water Management Permit Act is X and our usage is less than that. One of these other things that this Water Master Plan is meant to provide is a calculator or some sort of tool that the town can use that isn't just this assumption of 65 gallons per person per day across the whole year. It will look at how water use changes seasonally and how we can absorb additional larger development. So again, that hopefully should be a more refined tool that will come with this Water Master Plan.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Sean, for your question.
Okay. BB has a question.
Wait, there was one more from Kyle. I'm sorry. Wait, you got to make sure you get everybody. Kyle wanted to know where to find the precinct watering schedule. I think what we'll do is send out a link after this to everybody since we got your email when you registered. So it's on the town's water section, right, Becky?
Yes, and it's also part of that outdoor water use FAQ that you showed earlier.
Yep. So we'll send that around to people. Okay, BB. BB, are you here and would you like to ask your question? I don't know if BB's still with us. Well, her question was, or him, I'm not sure, how many out-of-town tourists are getting the message about being mindful for conserving water and the water ban in general? A good question. I suspect not as well as people who live here. I mean, if you're a day tripper, you're not interested probably, but probably they're not using a huge amount of water. I don't know, but again, indoor water use has been going down in our houses because the plumbing has become much better. So as we've been renovating our homes and upgrading fixtures, we definitely have seen decreased demand in home use. So I think that the trend has been definitely downward in the indoor plumbing industry to be much more conservative, but it's that outdoor use that's kind of a problem. And I don't know if out-of-town tourists, maybe who are renting, if they're renting, maybe that's kind of something to be considered. Hopefully I answered your question, BB. I don't know if I did, but.
Deb Lanahan has a question. Deb, can you unmute?
Yep, I'm here.
All right.
Yeah, I've always been curious, as you're heading north on 3A and you see the reservoir to the right, and then you see, I think that's Tack Factory Pond on the left, correct?
Yes.
So they're obviously not connected, but that is part of the reservoir system or not? Because you don't see that level go down. And I've often wondered if that is part of our water drinking supply or the function that it functions, if it is.
Yeah. Mark, do you want to field that one?
Yep, that's the start of the source, and it's held back by a dam. And so we're not taking water from that pond right there. We're taking water from the other pond on the right-hand side. That's where we draft most of our source water.
So that's a backup, I take it.
It's the source, and it overflows once it gets to a higher level. But we're not drafting off of it daily.
I got
for the
okay.
The lower one's drafted off daily.
Okay, I understand.
So the next question.
James Hunt.
James, do you want to ask?
Unmute.
I don't know if James is.
Okay, so I can just read it. Scituate's harbor master has hoses mounted throughout the 2 town-owned marinas and has not restricted the use of those hoses to wash down boats. Why not?
I'm going to let Becky or Mark answer that one.
And it is part of the outdoor water ban that you're not meant to wash boats down. So it seems like it would be an enforcement and education conversation. I know the commission had a conversation with the harbor master probably 2016, 2017, but it hasn't since. So it's good to know, not as someone who doesn't have my eyes out down there regularly, it's good to know that, and maybe Mark, the water department, could follow up.
Yep.
Sorry, this is Sean. I haven't jumped in yet.
Oh.
I've just been listening in since I chimed in. I know Kevin specifically went down recently this week to speak to them, to the marinas, about water conservation. I know boating is really big in Scituate, and I don't want to take that away from the residents, but on the same note, he wanted to go down and make a point of, everybody, we're in a full water ban and everybody needs to pitch in here. You need to either curb the usage or we're going to have to take measures, so we are reaching out to them and we are trying to regulate it. If people don't fall into line, then we'll have to do some drastic measures, I guess, but we're trying.
All right.
I'll just say about that, there is a huge population of boats in Scituate Harbor. We all know that. And there may be an opportunity there to really conserve water if we could come up with a different way for them to, I don't know if there's a way we could desalinate salt water to help them if they really wanted to. I'm a boat owner. You can use salt water to wash a boat down. It's not as nice, of course, but it does work. But maybe there's some technological thing that we could find out there that might allow them to use less salty water. Anyways, that's just my one little comment on that.
Mark Flieger, would you like to unmute? Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Mark. I think you answered my question already.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing I'd like to say is I really appreciate this level of communication. It's helped me understand what the issue is. So thanks for that. But no, I'm good with that. Although I did ask, is there any way to get water from other towns? I know in other places I've lived, that's what towns do. I'm not sure that's even feasible, but just curious.
So in the drought of 2016, I know that there was discussions ongoing with interconnections between towns. Cohasset does definitely have more storage than many of the communities around here. And I think eventually they agreed, although reluctantly, I think too. And I think the other concern is the chemical composition of different water and how it gets treated. So it's not something to be taken lightly, but it's something that you might investigate in your longer term things with Cohasset, with the water resources sort of master plan. I don't know if anybody, Becky or Mark, has anything to add to the Cohasset.
Well, the other towns are experiencing high usage also, so they're not
raising their hand.
very comfortable with giving their water away either.
Yeah.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay. We are going to be going over our 6 o'clock here. I don't mind doing that for a few more minutes, but I do have something else I need to do. So hopefully we can get to everybody. If
Emily
not,
Zimmer has a question.
Emily, are you on?
I am. Hi.
Hi.
No, I had just mentioned I'd heard about a program in Los Angeles that offered residents financial incentive for getting rid of their lawns and replacing with drought tolerant plants, which I thought sounded like something that would be good to try here. And I was just wondering if that had been considered or discussed or.
We've discussed, okay.
I was just going to say in the town of Hingham, they actually tried that, incentivizing ripping up your lawn and taking out your irrigation system, I think. Nope, nobody took them up on it.
Really?
So they offered some, amount of money to have people do that, and nobody. I think we have this misconception in Massachusetts that we have a lot of water, and so it's just in California in the Southwest they've started to realize, I think, that they live in a much different situation, and so I think It's just a harder mindset to take on here. But we haven't given up.
And the Water Resources Commission has discussed it in our conversations about the water offset or water budget that Sam had mentioned before, in terms of incentivizing it for new developments that might decrease the additional mitigation that they need to do. So, but again, another great idea that we can continue to bat around and keep on keeping on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Harris has a question.
Go ahead, Chris. Chris Harris, are you there?
I can ask her question. She wants to know if there are health risks with higher manganese.
I would ask Mark that question.
They recommend that we stay under 300 milligrams per liter, or 0.300 milligrams per liter for children and adults.
And so hopefully we're not near that.
No.
Okay, good.
I
And the
was just
follow-up
wondering
is
that.
we're not there. Okay, everybody should be
We do.
okay.
Just to add into that, we do take 6 distribution samples and test them, send them to a lab and have them tested for manganese. And the last round of samples were very, well below any threshold. It is something I'm monitoring because I know we have the issue with the manganese going into the surface water treatment plant. So I'm keeping a close eye on it. But obviously, if we had any exceedance, everyone would know about it.
Okay, thanks.
Who was that last speaker?
I'm sorry?
That's Sean Anderson. He's the superintendent of the water department.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So it looks like there's a few other questions that have already been answered. I'm trying to expedite. Laura, are you still with us?
Yep. I think we've pretty much covered everything in the rest of the questions.
Are there any requirements for showing impact on demand?
Yeah, those are my questions. Like, do we currently in the building, the permit process and planning board, are there any requirements around showing the impact on demand for the water?
Becky?
As part of the proposal?
Yes. Yeah. So as part of, you have to, based on the number of bedrooms for residential, they then look at average usage. So typically 2 people in a bedroom, average usage per day, do a projection out, and they have each proposal has to be approved by the water department in terms of saying that there's enough water to sustain this development. Typically that number is based again on that Water Management Act annual average.
Right. Well, we've had so many new high density developments that have come into town, and so I mean, knowing that we're having a lot of difficulty with the brown water and the drain on the system, just with the current level of development, like I'm kind of surprised that all this permitting and building is going on without there being concrete measures to put in new wells and improve the surface water. So I don't know who should answer that question, but it seems to me that if you want all the new development in town, you also have to be thinking about how you're going to improve the water infrastructure so that there is enough safe, clean water for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just say, ideally, a lot of information will come out of this water master plan that will help with planning beyond just using this Water Management Act permit as our only number. There was the talk of the well 17A being added to the system, the Dillon well fields, the increasing of the reservoir. So the goal is to increase storage and increase water capacity and clean water. It doesn't happen overnight. And again, on paper, even though I know in reality it's difficult and stressed, on paper, we still are within the state's regulations, and it can be hard to get around that.
And I just want to remind people that you have enough water for people and pets. You're not going to find that you can't drink your water. I mean, you may have brown water, and that's something you have to address. But in terms of supply, you do have enough for people and pets and for firefighting. You don't have enough for outdoor watering. And I don't know how else to reiterate that. In terms of the water bank policy, again, it would be, and they do it in Hingham, they do it in Weymouth. Developer comes in, I want to develop this. It's going to take 200 gallons a day. Okay, developer, you find 200 gallons a day in the system by retrofitting public buildings, private buildings, putting new toilets in, whatever it is, you pay to have the privilege of that water. And it would be a net zero. Or in the case, if you really want to be progressive, you could have them decrease your demand by saying, okay, for every gallon for new development, we're going to ask you to find 2 in the system. So I think that's a really good thing for you guys to be doing, and I've been pushing the Water Resources Committee to try to get that through. So we need your help to do that. In terms of desal, I'll just say it's really expensive, and I don't know that you would have a site for doing such a thing. You certainly would need regional. So it's not something that it would happen overnight. We're talking decades before you could have a desal plant. There is a desal plant in the Taunton River. It took decades for it to happen. Now nobody's using the water because it's too expensive. So it's just cheaper, unfortunately, to just use fresh water that you can take out of the ground. So I think there's just this one last. How urgent is the new water treatment plant? According to Mark and Sean, like super urgent.
Yeah, next spring would be nice.
Yeah, so I know they really want that to happen, and obviously that would help in terms of the stress level of our employees here, trying to provide you guys with water. So I think that sort of ends it, and I'm sorry if we didn't answer your questions or you still feel unsatisfied. It's not perfect, but we wanted to provide you with as much as we knew, and then please get involved. It is your government. You can be part of the solution and get involved in the Water Resources Commission, get involved by going and talking to the selectmen. I know people are definitely looking for your input, and there's a good group of there that are caring about this issue. So with that,
I just want to thank everyone here for all that you've done. I'm sorry that I came in late on it. You know, we've you know, done a lot in the water system. We're hoping a year from now, instead of being, you know, supplying the majority of the water from the surface water, we'll be switching it to the majority of the water is going to be coming from groundwater, which would be a great thing. And then maybe even improve that 3 to 5 years from now with the Dole and well fields. Thank you for putting this all together. And again, I'm sorry I didn't get to join in sooner.
We're glad that you're there with us, Sean. I will say that we recorded this, so we are going to provide a link to it at the end. We'll send you an email with a bunch of links. And my request to you is if you know people who you think are using water outdoors, send it to them and ask them to watch it. I know it can be hard to talk to your neighbors about their behavior, but I think there is a way for you to maybe convey it, hopefully in a way that is kind, but illustrative, because we are literally all in this together. So I hope you guys can do that for the town. I want to thank Becky, Lori, Sarah, Mark, and Sean for all their dedicated efforts to make sure that you guys have safe water.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all.
I'm going to leave the meeting and hope you all have a nice night.
Thank you.